We're going to be talking about 2.1 multiplying integers today. These are a completely new set of rules. It's not same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract and take. Instead, I'm going to teach you brand new rules. So the first thing that I want you to see, rules for multiplying positive and negative integers, are these. If you have an even amount of negative signs, your answer will be positive. So let's focus right now on this word even. I want you to take your red pens, draw a little cloud around it. Even amount of negative signs. Go ahead and underline the words negative signs. So I want you to look at my example right here. Notice -2 times -5. How many negative signs do you see there, class? There are 2. Do you understand the number 2 is an even number, right? So because there are 2 even signs right there, your answer has to be a positive answer. So that's why -2 times -5 equals positive 10. Now, what's another example of an even number? Not just 2, but what else? A 4, okay? So let's imagine if we had 4 negative signs like this. -1 times -2 times -2 times -1. Notice once again, this is an even amount because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Your answer also would be positive, okay? Now, typically I'm not going to give you more than 4 numbers in a problem, so we'll stop there. But if you had 6, 8, 10, 12, all of those, any amount of even numbers of signs that you see there, then your answer will always be a positive. Let's go on to the next one. I want you to take your red pen and draw a cloud around the word odd. What's the smallest odd number that we know? 1, okay? If there's only 1 negative sign, that's an odd number of, or an odd amount of signs, your answer would be negative, okay? What's the next odd number? 3, okay? So if you look at this right here, 1, 2, 3. That's an odd amount of negative signs. So your answer has to be what? Positive or negative?
Negative.
It has to be negative, okay? So that's why when doing this kind of a problem, you can see 2 times 3 would be 6, 6 times 5 would be 30, but because there are 1, 2, 3 negative signs, an odd amount of negative signs, my answer has to be -30. Let's look over here. How many negative signs do you see in that highlighted problem? -2 times 4. How many are here? Only 1 negative sign. Is the number 1 an odd number or an even number? It is an odd number. So once again, as you remember up here, this says if you have an odd amount of negative signs, your answer has to be what? It has to be negative, and that's why your answer here was -8. We're going to do a few practice problems using these new rules. The first thing I want you to do every time is try to figure out, is my answer going to be positive or is it going to be negative? So let's go ahead and look at the first one. It says -5 times -6. Does anyone think they might know why this is in parentheses right there? That just shows us this is a negative number. So it's putting the parentheses around to make sure you see the negative sign. But you can see this little dot also means to multiply. So it's just telling us we're multiplying by a negative number. If I have, let's count the number of negative signs here. Count them with me. 1, 2. Is the number 2 even or odd? That is an even number. Looking up at the top at your notes, if you have an even number of negative signs, your answer has to be what? It has to be a positive. And now we're just going to focus on this like normal. What is 5 times 6? 30. So we know that the answer is positive 30. Let's go over here to problem B. Chloe, how many negative signs do you see in problem B? There's only 1 negative sign. Is the number 1 even or odd, class? It is odd. Looking up at your notes, if you have an odd amount of negative signs, your answer has to be what? It has to be negative. So, Chloe, what's the answer? All right, -24 is correct. Let's go ahead and box that in. All right, once again, guys, what does it mean when you have a number next to parentheses? It means to multiply. So just remember, those parentheses are telling us we have to multiply. Rodney, how many negative signs do you see in problem C? 1. Is the number 1 even or odd? The number 1 is odd. So if I have an odd number of negative signs, my answer has to be what? Positive or negative? It must be negative. So what's my answer?
-12.
-12. Let's go to the next one. 5 times 5. What do you think? 25, all right? That one was a very simple one because we had no negative signs there, all right? So 0, if there are 0 negative signs, then my answer has to be positive because 0 is positive. Or it's just a normal problem, 5 times 5. Let's go on to the next one. Negative 25 times 0. Miley? 0. Now listen, there's only one negative sign there, guys. So should my answer be negative 0? No, why not? 0 cannot be positive or negative, so we're not going to say it's negative 0. Remember, we think about money sometimes. I wouldn't go around and say, man, I have negative $0. I would just say, I don't have any dollars. I have $0. So instead, our answer is just plain old 0. Next one, negative 1 times negative 9. Ariana, how many negative signs do you see there? 2. Is the number 2 positive or negative?
Positive.
It is positive, okay, sorry, because it's an even one, so we're going to keep it as a positive. So what's the answer?
10.
What's 1 times 9? 9, okay? So because there was an even amount of negative signs, we knew our answer had to be positive. Are there any questions about those first 6 problems? Okay, just remember, if you have an even amount of negative signs, your answer is positive. If you have an odd amount of negative signs, your answer will be negative. All right, so we've got a little reminder here about PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. All right, I want you to pull out your red pens and go ahead and fill in this slide for me, please, about the different steps for PEMDAS. All right, so we did talk about these different steps when we introduced Chapter 2 last week. The first thing is parentheses. Next up is exponents. If you remember, we said that this was called 3 squared. What does 3 squared mean? 3 times 3. Remember, it's always going to be multiplying by itself, not 3 times a tiny 2, okay? Next up, we've got multiplication and division. Notice that I do not have the M on top of the D. Why is it that multiplication and division are next to each other on this? What do you think?
Because whichever one goes first, that's what you do first.
That is correct. Whichever one comes first on the line is the one that you're going to do. So that's why it says over here from left to right. If the multiplication comes first on the left side, do that first. But if division comes before multiplication, you're going to do that first. You do whatever it is that comes from left to right. And then the same idea happens also down here for addition and subtraction. You will also be working that from left to right, whichever one comes first. So we're going to be using PEMDAS on this next slide as we do these notes. Down at the bottom, you'll see it says evaluate the expression. Find your sign first. Go ahead and put that in your notes with your red pen. This is very important, okay, as we're doing this multiplying, and this is going to be the same rules for our dividing also. Always figure out, is this answer positive or negative? And then multiply the answer together next. Let's look at the first one, negative 2 squared. What does that mean?
It's negative 2, it's multiplied by itself.
You are correct. Negative 2 multiplied by itself. So that's going to be negative 2 times negative 2. All right, this is the way I want you to show your work. Anytime you see that squared, go ahead and show me what does that mean exactly. All right, now guys, how many negative signs do you see there? There are 2. Is the number 2 even or odd?
Even.
That is even. Remember in our notes, anytime you have an even amount of negative signs, your answer will always be positive. Okay, that's a rule. You guys got to make sure you memorize that. So it's going to be a positive answer. And then what's 2 times 2? 4. So the answer is going to be positive 4. The next one looks very similar. Notice this says negative 2 squared. This one says negative 2 squared. But there's one thing that's different between problem A and problem B. Can someone explain to me what's different? Alexis, what's different? There are no parentheses. So here's what's interesting. This one over here is only squaring the 2. So guess what I need to do to that negative sign out there? Repeat after me. Drop it down. All right, so we are going to go ahead and first off, before we do anything else, drop down the negative sign. Now, all I will be squaring is just the positive 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write this 2 times itself, which is 2 times 2. All right, if you're writing with your red pen, go ahead and put that red pen down, and you could just go ahead and write with your pencil. So guess what needs to happen to that negative sign once again? I'm just going to drop it down because it's there on the outside, okay? So drop down that negative sign. And then, guys, what is 2 times 2? 4. So guess what your answer is? -4. Notice you do have a different answer from the first one, and that's all because of those little parentheses that are there. Once again, look for the parentheses because it tells you to square the negative or to not square the negative. Let's go to the next one. On to problem C. -2 times +17 times -5. Just looking at that automatically, I want to know, will my answer come out as a positive or a negative, class? It is going to be a positive because how many negative signs do you see there? 2. Is the number 2 an even or an odd number? It's an even number, and in our rules we learned if you have an even number of negative signs, your answer will always be positive. So now let's go ahead and focus on, we don't necessarily know our 17 times tables, okay? But what we do know is our 2's and our 5's times tables. Remember the commutative property? It says you can multiply in any order that you want, and you're going to get the same answer. So let's do this first. What's -2 times -5? Okay, remember 2 negatives, your answer will be a positive. So that right there, multiplying those 2 together is +10. What do I still need to bring down? Okay, we're going to multiply times 17. You could put a little dot there. You could put parentheses there. That's totally up to you. Now, when multiplying something times the number 10, all you have to do is just add a 0 to the end of it. So guys, what would my answer be? 170. Go ahead and put that directly underneath it and box your answer in. Problem D, we are going to use PEMDAS for this. What does the P stand for in PEMDAS? Parentheses. Is there any work to do in parentheses here? Yes. Now, here's where we get tricked up. Am I multiplying anything inside of my parentheses? No. Look what it says. -3 plus 4. So this means we're going back to our rules that we've used before. Same sign, add and keep. Different sign, subtract. Do I have the same sign or different sign inside my parentheses? Different sign. Subtract and take. So guys, what's -3 plus 4?
1.
Okay, +1 because the 4 was bigger. So I'm going to bring that down. What else do I still need to bring down? -6. Now, when I have a number outside of parentheses, what am I supposed to do to that -6? I have to multiply it. So what would be smart is to bring down those parentheses. Parentheses will tell us I've got to multiply my number. Now let's focus on how many negative signs I have. How many? 1. It says -6 times 1. Right now I'm just focusing on this line that I've come to. If I only have 1, is the number 1 odd or even? Odd. I have an odd number of negative signs. So my answer has to be, it must be a negative, and 6 times 1 is 6. So my answer is going to be -6. I want you to try to do problem E on your own. All right, as I just walked around, I was very pleased with the answer because there's 2 negatives. That's an even number. I have an even number of negative signs, so my answer has to be positive. So what's the answer? 10 is correct. Last problem on here. -4 squared times 2. Is my -4 in parentheses? No. So am I squaring the negative or not? No. I am not. So what do you think I should do to my negative sign? Just drop it down. Remember, you will only square the negative if it is inside of parentheses. Now let's just do this in our head, guys. What's 4 squared? 16. It does not mean 4 times 2. It means 4 times itself. So the answer is 16. And then times 2. Now, as I look at this, how many negative signs do you see in this problem?
1.
Only 1. That's an odd number of negative signs. So is my answer going to be positive or negative? Negative. So let's put our negative there. If you do not know how to double 16, you are always allowed to work over here onto the side and multiply it if you need to. Guys, what's 16 times 2? 32. So we know that our answer is going to be -32. Any questions about how we evaluated those expressions? Okay, so as you saw on the homework board already, normally we do our quizzes on Mondays, but coming up on Monday, there is a holiday. So we're not gonna have our quiz next Monday. Instead, it's gonna be this Friday, okay? And as you can see on the board, it's only covering 2.1 and 2.2. So it's covering today's lesson and then one more lesson that we're gonna do. Last week, it covered 5 sections. This week's quiz is only gonna cover 2 about multiplying and dividing. And then I'm gonna put some in there about how to add and subtract integers also. So the next problem is a modeling real life problem or a riddle. You solve a number puzzle on your phone. You start with 250 points. You finish the puzzle in 8 minutes and 45 seconds and you make 3 mistakes. Each mistake is worth how many points? Negative 50. So are you getting points or losing points if you make a mistake? You're going to be losing some points from this score up here that you started with. And each second under 10 minutes gives you 1 point bonus. All right, so if it's a point bonus, is that a positive or a negative? That's going to be a positive, okay? What is your final score? So we're going to kind of break this down to help us understand how to figure this out. And once again, there will be a question like this on your quiz on Friday. First off, let's talk about, there's 2 things here. There's way to get positive points and ways to get negative points. Your time can give you positive points. How long did it take you guys to do this puzzle? 8 minutes and 45 seconds. You do not want it to go over how much, guys? 10 minutes. Did we accomplish this in less than 10 minutes?
Yes.
We did. It only took us 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So let's try to figure out how much time did we have left before we got to that 10-minute mark?
135.
Not 135.
115.
1 minute and 15 seconds, okay? Because think about it. If you added 15 seconds to that right there, you'd be up to 60 seconds, right? And there's 60 seconds in a minute. And then that would only be 9 minutes total. And we accomplished it in less than 10. So the time that we had as a bonus was, write this down, 1 minute and 15 seconds. Okay, I still had 1 minute and 15 seconds left until I hit that 10-minute mark. Let's change this into all seconds. How many seconds did we say are in a minute? 60. Okay, so this right here is 60 seconds. What would 60 plus 15 seconds be? How much is that? 75 seconds. Okay, so I want you guys to just draw a little arrow over there. That is 75 seconds. What did it tell me I would get for every single second that was under 10 minutes? A 1 point bonus. So do I have positive 75 or negative 75? I've got positive. So I want you guys just to write over here, positive 75. Now what we're going to do, I want you to go ahead and take your pencil and circle that. This is not my final answer, so I don't want to box it in. But plus 75 is something that I'm going to have to put in here to help me figure out what my final score was. Now, we did say time would come into consideration. What else was into consideration for this score? You're right. If I make mistakes, if I miss a question, then I'm going to lose some points. So underneath this, let's just go ahead and write down mistakes. What happens if I make a mistake, guys?
You get negative 50.
I get negative 50 points. So we're just going to write negative 50 here. And Hayden, did you catch how many mistakes we made on this?
You made three mistakes.
You're right. Now, guys, how would I find out how many total points I'm losing?
Times it by 3.
I'm going to multiply it by 3 because one is negative 50. Another one would be a negative 50 more. Another one would be negative 50 more. So I could do negative 50 minus 50 minus 50, or I can just multiply it by 3. Now let's remember our rules from today. How many negative numbers do you see there?
1.
Only 1. Is the number 1 even or odd? So I have an odd number of negative signs, which means my answer has to be negative. Very good job. Okay, guys, what is negative 50 times 3?
Negative 150.
Negative 150. Now, I also want us to go ahead and circle that, because that's a part of our answer that we need in order to find this out. If I go back and reread it again, it says you solve the number puzzle on your phone and you start with 250 points. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with that. 250. And then you can see I'm going to add 75 and I have to subtract 150. Remember, according to the commutative property, it does not matter if you add or subtract first. Okay, you can work from left to right, but you're going to get the same answer either way. Let's see if we can do this right here. You can do mental math or you can work it on the side if you need to. What is 250 plus 75?
325.
325. And then what should I do to this minus 150?
Drop it down.
We're just going to drop it down. Once again, you can go ahead, come off to the side over here and subtract it. Guys, what do you get as your final answer?
175.
175. Now remember, whenever I have modeling real life, what do I need to do? We've got to make sure I've got units attached. What do I have? 175 what? Points. So always remember, please make sure that you do have some kind of units attached so I know what you're talking about. 175 what? Okay? Now, we will have more problems like that we'll be reviewing over. There will be a homework problem like that tomorrow. But make sure you understand how to do a problem like this. You're getting some positives, getting some negatives, and then multiplying or putting it together to try to get your answer. All right, so on the next section, we're going to do a think, pair, share, where you try to come up with the answers on your own. I want you guys to try number 1 and 2 on your own. All right, just the boys, -1 times -9?
9.
9 is correct because whenever you have an even number of negative signs, your answer has to be positive. Just the girls, -25 times 0? 0, because anything multiplied by 0 always equals 0. There's no such thing as a positive or a negative 0. I want you to go on and go ahead, just do problem number 3. Please be very careful. Think about PEMDAS and the steps you're allowed to do along the way. All right, so this is kind of weird because we've got an exponent inside of parentheses. I've got to work on that first before I can do anything else. So help me with that, guys. What's 3 squared? 9. So we're just going to drop that down, and this now means 9 minus 8 plus 1. Remember, you're only allowed to underline and do one tiny little section at a time, okay? What's the next thing that I should underline and do? 9 minus 8. Good job, because that's P for parentheses in PEMDAS. What is 9 minus 8? 1. Here's what I saw as I just looked around. A lot of people are not dropping the other stuff down. You must drop the stuff down. Everything else has to come down. Notice, there were parentheses here. Why would I want to keep those parentheses? That tells me I have to multiply. If I just let those parentheses go away, I might think I'm adding the 1, I might think I'm subtracting it, or that it's just -41. So make sure you bring the parentheses down. Now we have to do a +1. There's 2 things left. This tells me I need to multiply it together. This tells me I need to add. According to PEMDAS, what do I do first? Add or multiply? You have to multiply. So please, everybody, if you didn't, underline that for me. -4 times 1. What is -4 times 1? It is -4, because when you have only one negative sign, that's an odd number. That means you have to keep the negative sign. Now we've got a case of the adds and subtracts. Remember, that's what I would go to before. Nothing to do with multiplying now, because there's nothing that tells me to multiply. Same sign, add and keep. Different signs, subtract and take. What's the answer?
3.
Not 3.
-3.
It is -3 because I have to take the sign of the larger number. Let's look at number 12. According to PEMDAS, I have to do parentheses first. I see parentheses here, but is there any work to do inside of the parentheses? No, so that's not what the P parentheses is saying. The only reason why those parentheses are there is to tell you you're multiplying it by a negative number. Not a positive number, but a negative number. So what's the first step that I should do? Exponents, E for exponents. So let's focus on that. 3 squared. Guys, what's 3 squared? 9. So everybody go ahead and underline that. Then drop down your 9. What should I do with all the stuff in front and behind the 9? Drop it down. Okay, so I've got 12 minus. Now with this, I do have multiply by a negative number. You could drop it down with that little dot still here, or if you wanted, you can also go like this. Because anytime you have a number right next to another number, that means to multiply. If it helps you to bring down the little multiply sign, that's fine too. You can bring down times -2. All right, do the rest on your own. As I walked around, I did see a few different answers. -6 is probably the one I saw the most. Let me explain to you what we need to do. According to PEMDAS, should I do this multiply over here first, or should I subtract first? Multiply. The problem with those who got a -6 is they chose to add or subtract first. So I want you to look at this. What is 9 times -2? -18. And then you still need to bring down the 12 and the minus. What do I have there? A double negative. So now instead I should have 12 plus 18. What is 12 plus 18?
30.
That's 30. So you got to be careful there. Because of PEMDAS, a lot of people tried to do 12 minus 9 first, but that will give you the wrong answer because according to PEMDAS, you have to make sure you multiply first before you add or subtract. Next up, your friend evaluates the expression. Are they correct? Let's look at what they did. They said -2 times -7 equals -14. Is this correct or incorrect, class?
Incorrect.
Incorrect. So when it asks us, is your friend correct? The answer is no. How come?
Because 2 negatives equal a positive.
2 negatives should have equaled a positive. All right, so according to that, instead, this should have been positive 14, okay? Because negative times a negative, that's an even number, and anytime you have an even number of negative signs, your answer is always going to be positive. True or false? The product of 3 negative numbers, okay, underline that word 3, is always going to be positive. I want you to underline the word positive. So if you want to, you could give yourself a little example. -2 times -3 times -1, okay? Should my answer be positive or negative, class? Negative. So is this true or false?
False.
This is going to be false. Instead, the reasoning why is it's supposed to be negative, not positive. Final problem of the day. True or false? The product of 3 positive integers is positive. I'm going to go ahead and underline 3 and positive. So give yourself an example. 2 times 4 times 3. Would that be positive?
Yes.
That is correct. A lot of times when you get these true and false things, it helps to give yourself a little example like this over here so you can picture it or visualize it a little bit better, okay? And there will be questions that are true and false like this on your quiz coming up on Friday, okay? The homework assignment that has to do with this is 2.1. Remember, as we do our homework assignments, you got to make sure you enter it in big ideas and also on a piece of paper.